National Nancy's, the fourth in the Alex Reynolds Mysteries. Author Fred Hunter, St. Martin's Press, New York, 2000. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 10. I had a very difficult time getting to sleep. Our brush with death left me hyped up, but at the same time I had a strange feeling of emptiness. It was like being an electrified corn husk. I tossed and turned for close to an hour, and then tried to get myself under control without much success. I lay on my back for a while, then on my side, with my butt touching Peter's thigh. Finally, I turned over on my other side, slipped my arms around him, and spooned him so hard you would have thought I was on a toboggan run. It was in that attitude that I finally fell asleep. I woke up around 10 o'clock Saturday morning. The digital clock was giving its usual precise reading, but there didn't seem any point in that kind of accuracy just then. I climbed out of bed slowly, weighed down by residual drowsiness, and went into the bathroom. When I came back out, I stood in the doorway and watched Peter sleep. He was on his back, his left leg straight, and his right bent with the sole of the foot against his left calf. He has beautiful legs, slender and muscular, with a dusting of dark brown hair. His right arm was stretched across his forehead, and his left hand rested on his stomach. 8 years together, and the mere sight of him still excites me. I stepped out of my brace and got back into bed, snuggling up next to him. I laid my hand over his and gently kissed his nipple. He stirred, and although he didn't open his eyes, he smiled. "What are you doing?" he said, his voice husky with sleep. "I'm just glad you're alive," I said, kissing his chest. "Every time somebody tries to kill us, I'm just glad to be alive." His eyes fluttered open, and he looked at the ceiling. "You know, before I met you, I never imagined that I would ever be thinking in terms like, every time somebody tries to kill me." I pursed my lips. "Shut up and make love to me." It was another hour before we got downstairs. Mother had left a note that she was out looking at cars and had taken Duffy with her. Apparently, she had to make sure the car had dog appeal before making a purchase. We turned into the local news while having a bite to eat before setting out. Charles Clark and his dutiful wife, Wendy, were shown smiling and waving at a rally attended by an incredibly broad range of people. At least as far as I could tell from the 5-second sweep the camera took of the crowd. Clark fairly oozed sincerity as he addressed the people, even though he was my candidate. I still couldn't help but think of him in terms of oozing, and Wendy managed to look as if her only regret was that the rally was keeping her from baking cookies for all the low-income children of Chicago. Shorter shrift was given to the two other Democratic candidates, William Lederer and Melvin Colton. Since they were no longer considered serious challenges to Clark, their coverage pretty much consisted of having their pictures flashed on the screen while the talking head said something that amounted to, "Oh, yeah, they had rallies too." Much fuller coverage was given to the Republican candidate. Fritz Peterson was accompanied by his wife, Tippy, as they visited a hospital, and then appeared at their own rally. Unlike the Clark affair, the revelers at the Peterson rally were all wearing straw hats, and there was a whole lot of red, white, and blue in evidence. It was the usual noisy, "the only true Americans are Republicans" affair. Fritz Peterson was a tall, husky man with premature gray on both his head and his mustache, which made him look much older than he really was. His wife was a bit shorter than him and had a habit of standing with her fingers pressed together beneath her nose, as if she were constantly praying for guidance. "Why are you looking like that?" Peter asked just before taking a bite of his sandwich. "Like what?" "Your face is all scrunched up." "Oh, I was just wondering what on earth they have on Peterson, and I hope to God he's not gay. I mean, look at him. He looks like he's taking a break from selling chicken. I don't want to see a tape of Colonel Sanders boinking another guy." We finished eating and quickly washed up after ourselves. We were in a hurry to leave, but I needed to make a call first. I picked up the receiver of our kitchen phone, dialed, and waited. It rang 3 times before being answered by Agent Lawrence Nelson. Yes. Hello, Larry. It's Alex Reynolds. What are you calling him for? Asked Peter. I shushed him. Yes, Alex. I had to hand it to Nelson. He never sounded surprised to hear from me, even though he almost never had reason to expect a call. And he never let on that it irritated him when I called him Larry, although I like to think it did. I think you know we've been asked to do a little job of work for the FBI, I said. I also know that you've been relieved of duty, he replied without emotion. Already? My heart sank. I thought it would take Henry at least a little while to let Nelson know what happened. Then again, it was almost noon. I was told very, very early this morning. He didn't waste any time, did he? I said flatly. We usually don't in cases such as this. You mean when two of your people are almost blown to bits? I was starting to get angry, even though I knew it was important to hold my temper if I was going to get him to cooperate. Is there something I can do for you, Alex? Yes, I have a favor to ask you, and I want to know if I can ask it of you in confidence. That depends on what it is. You do understand that you are no longer under any authority to work on this case. I could have sworn there was a smile in his tone, were it within Nelson's nature to smile. Of course, I understand that. And you know that even though you're not on the case, if you have any information bearing on it, you are obliged to turn it over. Yes, I said reluctantly. All right, then ask your favor. I took a deep breath. I want you to find all the information you can on someone named Simon Tivoli. What? Peter exclaimed loudly. Alex, you can't. I put my hand over the mouthpiece and whispered, We'll talk about it in a minute. Simon Tivoli, Nelson repeated, ignoring Peter's outburst, which I felt sure he'd been able to hear over the phone. I uncovered the mouthpiece. Yes, that's right. He's from London, England. He came here about a week ago. He says he works for a computer company called Cyberdyne. I want to know if he's legit. There was a short silence. Does this have something to do with the bombing of Charles Clark's office? I don't know. I don't think so. I hope not. It would be easier to run him if I had his fingerprints. I could lift them from my mother, but that hardly seems practical. There was a longer pause. Oh, I see. It may not have anything to do with Clark. Larry, it's a long shot. I just want to make sure. Yes, well, it's better to be safe than sorry, isn't it? Nelson replied. Once again, I had the annoying feeling I was being made fun of. And do me another favor, will you? When you call back with the information, if you get Mother or the answer machine, please don't leave a message. Only talk to me. All right. We both said goodbye and hung up. Peter was beside himself. Alex, I can't believe you. You can't check up on your own mother. I'm not checking up on her, I countered. I'm checking up on her boyfriend. Just as any dutiful son who had the resources of the CIA at his disposal would do. Honey, you really have lost your mind. We already discussed. I know what we discussed, I said loudly, and then I took a couple of seconds to calm myself. Look, believe it or not, I'm not any happier about doing this than you are. But we have to be thorough and we have to face facts. What facts? The tape. Peter, the tape. Simon was with Mother last night at the party when she asked about the tape. And the attempt on us wasn't made until after the party. Well, so Simon heard your mother ask about it. Nobody tried to kill her. I sighed. I know you don't agree with me. Just for a minute, pretend that he might be a suspect. Okay, he said with a smile. You and I started asking about the tape the day before the party, and nothing happened to us. When Mother was at the party, that was the first time she asked about the tape. And it was right after that the attempt was made on us. That's true, Peter said skeptically. If Simon's the bomber, he couldn't very well have killed Mother last night because he would have been the last person to be seen with her. We were a different story. Mother was in bed alone when we got the call, so Simon could easily have been the one that did it. All right, Peter conceded. So we'll consider him a suspect. For the time being, even though I still find it hard to believe. Within all likelihood, you're right, and I'm wrong. But Nelson should be able to settle it once and for all. If Simon isn't what he says he is, Nelson will find it out. We took the L down to North and Clybourne and walked back up to the Lynn Hayden home. I half expected to find Mary still standing there, staring out through the picture window like a sunken-eyed waif. But the curtains were drawn against the glaring early afternoon sunlight. We knocked and waited. After a minute, the lock snapped and the door was opened by Annie Watson. "Oh, hello," she said, apparently as surprised to see us as we were to see her. "Hi, Annie. Is Mary here?" I asked. Yeah. Come in, I guess." She stepped aside to let us in and closed the door behind us. "Who is it?" Mary called from the back of the house. She sounded as if her spirits had done a complete about-face since we'd last seen her. "A couple of guys from the office," Annie said loudly. "Who?" "Alex Reynolds and Peter Livesey." "Oh, just a minute." She emerged from the kitchen, drying her hand with a limp dish towel. Some of the color had come back into her cheeks since last Sunday, although that could have been makeup. She had obviously taken more pains over her face, and since she hadn't known we were coming, I could assume the effort hadn't been for us. She looked positively debutante-like in her pale blue knee-length skirt, white knee-high socks, and starched white blouse. A pink bow loosely tied her neatly combed hair. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she said hesitantly. "We need to talk to you," I said. "Right now?" said Annie. "You have to talk to her now. She needs to rest. She's in mourning, you know." I glanced at Mary. I can see that." "Annie came over to bring me a casserole," Mary said quickly. "It's one of those traditions I've never understood, making casseroles. Nobody likes them, but that's what you're supposed to do when somebody dies," Annie added. "I like them," Mary said with sincerity. A look passed between them, and I can only describe it as something I wish I hadn't seen, given that it was the day before Jody's memorial service. "We really do need to talk to you," said Peter. "Alone," I added. I had the satisfaction of seeing Annie's face turn beetroot. "I'll go finish up in the kitchen." She marched very deliberately to the back of the house and disappeared through the swinging doors that separated the dining room from the kitchen. "She brought over a casserole," Mary repeated with a reticent smile. "So you said." "It was very nice of her. It was so near noon, I asked her to stay for lunch." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and smiled, hoping that I looked like I believed her and that she would stop explaining, which was getting more embarrassing by the minute. "We were just cleaning up when you rang the bell. She's going to stay and help me sort through the bills." She put her hands to her cheeks fretfully. "I don't know anything about paying the bills. Jody always took care of everything. I couldn't even. I had to search the whole house just to find the checkbook." Annie said, "She'll show me how to do them." "We need to talk to you about Jody," said Peter, thankfully bringing the matter of Annie's visit to a close. She lowered her hands. "What about her?" "The other day you told us that Jody was trying to get dirt on Fritz Peterson. We need to know how she was going about it," I explained. I don't know," she said unconvincingly. "Why do you want to know?" "Because last night somebody tried to kill us." Peter said, "They tried to blow us up, just the way they did Jody." Mary's doe-like eyes grew wider and her jaw dropped, but not so much as to be unladylike. That's awful. Why would somebody try to kill you?" "We think it's because we were asking about the tape." She gasped. "You what?" "Don't worry," I said. "We were just trying to find out what was on it, or if anyone knew about it. We didn't tell anyone how we knew about it." "Oh, God! Oh, God!" she exclaimed, her palms going back up to her cheeks. The color drained from her face, bearing evidence that the rosiness hadn't been cosmetics. What have I done? I never should have told you about it. It's all right. It's all right, I said. We'll be fine. But we have to find out who tried to kill us, and in order to do that, we have to try to trace what Jody was doing. You told us that somebody called Jody and said they had a tape of Peterson. That's true, she said plaintively, as if she suspected she was being accused of lying. We know that, but what we wanted to know is why Jody believed it so readily. She blinked at me. I don't understand. I told you, she got this call. She never heard about the existence of a tape at all before that? No. Mary was having a very difficult time looking either me or Peter in the eye. So before she got that phone call, I pressed, she'd never heard about the tape. Then she gets this call, and that was all it took? To get her to go out and meet this person? I don't believe it. I don't believe Jody was that stupid. No, we're the only ones that are that stupid, said Peter. I don't know anything, Mary said desperately. I don't. I don't. She started to cry, but from the look on her face, it was from fear rather than sorrow. Hey, what are you doing to her? Annie had come in from the kitchen without our noticing her. Her neatly plucked brows were knit together and her small mouth formed a frown. We didn't mean to upset her, Peter replied. And then he turned to Mary. We really didn't. But Mary, this is very important. Jody's been killed and our lives are in danger. We have to find out who's doing this. Mary looked up, her watery eyes wide with terror. Because of the tape? But then I'm in danger. Maybe, but I don't think so. The killer had to know that Jody would tell you what was going on, and he hasn't hurt you yet. Nobody's going to hurt you, Annie said, laying a soothing hand on Mary's shoulder. Maybe we should go away for a while. I was too stunned to say anything. Peter said, that might not be a bad idea, but first we need to know what Jody was doing. I don't think you're in any danger. But if you are, telling us isn't going to make it that any worse, and it may help. Are you sure she never said anything about the tape to you before she got that call? She nodded meekly. Then please, how was she trying to dig up the dirt? Mary looked for guidance to Annie, who stared back at her stoically. If there was anything to be read there, I couldn't see it. Mary turned back to us and said, She asked around. She talked to everybody. At the office? I asked. Mary nodded. She didn't talk to us. She didn't think you knew anything. I gritted my teeth and glanced at Peter. Peter said, It's hard to believe that she did much asking around the office and we didn't hear about it. Well, actually, I don't think she talked much to the volunteers. But I know she talked to Mr. Schuler about the possibility of finding stuff on Peterson. I don't know if she talked to Mr. Clark because he wasn't as accessible. So, Schuler did know Jody was looking for dirt. Who else? Mary shook her head slowly and shrugged. I told you, she talked to a lot of people. People at the office, and Joe and Sheila, because they're friends of ours. She even talked to me, said Annie. But who told her about the tape? You must know, I asked Mary. She didn't answer. She just looked at me with those wide, wet eyes and continued to shake her head. Mary, Peter said gently, I know how close you and Jody were. I can't believe she came across an important piece of information and didn't tell you about it. Tears began to course down her cheeks again. She nervously wiped them away. She didn't. I swear it. I heaved a frustrated sigh. Who else did she talk to? I mean, outside of the office. She went everywhere. She asked at the bars because she thought if there was anything going around, she could probably find out about it there. She even went to Ned Turner. Ned Turner? I said. The gossip columnist. She knew him. She didn't, but she tried everybody she could think of and couldn't find anything, and all anybody ever said was that they heard Mr. Peterson was gay. But then she thought of asking Mr. Turner. She figured if anybody knew anything dirty on anybody, especially about sex, it would be him. That made sense. Turner wasn't just a gossip columnist. He was a bitchy gay gossip columnist. He worked for Chicago Light, one of the seedier of the local rags. Ned specialized in very thinly veiled blind items that virtually outed famous people as well as items that weren't blind at all. Turner's columns had been the beginning of the end for more than one politician, as well as fanning the flames beneath the dubious sexuality of many movie and television stars. It made perfect sense that she would go to him since he would be likely to know all the rumors, and which were true and which weren't. I silently kicked myself for not having thought of this on my own. Although, since we didn't know him personally and rarely read his column, there was no reason why we should have. She didn't tell you what Turner told her? I asked. No, Mary replied vacantly. No, she didn't say anything about it. Wasn't that unusual? She looked up at me, and the tears suddenly stopped in midstream. It was apparent that she had just realized something that hadn't occurred to her before. Yeah, yes, it was. Mary, I said as sincerely as I knew how, we're going to try to find out what happened to Jody and see that something's done about it. Thank you, she said softly without looking me in the eye. Peter added, but in the meantime, taking a vacation really might not be a bad idea. On our way back to the L, I said, Annie certainly has moved in fast, hasn't she? Peter sighed. Well, they were friends before, weren't they? Didn't you tell me that she was the only one that Jody and Mary trusted with a key to the office? Yeah, but still, I was getting sort of a lioness protecting her cub feeling from her. That made me awfully uncomfortable. It made me feel like she'd been waiting in the wings for something to happen to Jody. I was silent for a moment, then added, would you do me a favor? What? If something ever happens to me, would you at least wait a week before taking up with somebody else? He smiled. Sweetheart, if anything ever happened to you, I would throw myself on the pyre. I laughed. I still find it hard to believe that Jody didn't tell Mary about the tape before. If she knew about it before. Granted. But I don't find it that hard to believe. It looks like Jody protected her from everything. Maybe she wouldn't tell her something if she thought it would upset her. You're probably right. I think it's really significant that Jody didn't talk about whatever Ned Turner had to say. I think so too. Well, at least Mary confirmed one thing, I said. Schuler knew what Jody was doing. Yes, but so what? It doesn't give him a reason to kill her, despite what he says. I would think he'd be glad to get the skinny on Peterson. We walked along in silence for a few moments. Then I said, Oh, I just thought of something. We were probably there when she talked to him. Who? Schuler? We were? Peter scrunched his face into an attractive puzzle. Remember last Saturday when she came out of Schuler's office and was so disgusted with him? I'll bet that's when she talked to him about the tape. You're probably right. You know, there's one thing that bothers me about what Mary said. I don't understand why she hasn't been killed either. It seems like everybody else who knows about the tape has had an attempt made on them. Not everybody. No one's tried to kill your mother. That's right. You sound disappointed. I gave his shoulder a playful slap. No, I just don't understand it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I do. And you're right. It doesn't make sense. I thought about this for a moment. Unless it's like you said earlier, because you and me and Jody were the ones that gave the impression we were pursuing the tape. Yeah, but your mother asked about it too. The same way we did. I mean, if the killer was assuming we were trying to find it, wouldn't he assume the same thing about her? Probably. But not Mary. He must know that Mary didn't tell the authorities about the tape, because they would have been on the trail of it right away. That's true. We fell into a frustrated silence as we reached the L station. We zipped our fare cards through the turnstile machines and went down to the platform. Wait a minute, said Peter. Well, where are we going? I thought we were going to the office. Shouldn't we talk to Ned Turner first? You're right, since neither of us knew where the Chicago Light office was located, let alone whether or not Turner would be there on a Saturday. We went to the payphone on the platform and called directory assistance. And they gave us the number, but didn't have the address. The phone at the paper was answered by a perky, near falsetto voice that swung upward as it said, "Chicago Light," as if the air was rapidly escaping from it. After explaining in the vaguest possible terms that I needed to talk to Ned Turner, I managed to elicit the fact that he normally stopped in at 5 to drop off his column and pick up his correspondence, but that he was difficult to catch. It was a bit harder to get the guy to give me their address, something they were reluctant to do for fear of being targeted by various nutcases. It wasn't until I explained that the matter I needed to see Turner about concerned Jody, and that he relented and gave it to me. With over 3 hours to spare before being able to see Turner, we decided to go on to the office. I would have loved to have challenged Schuler again on whether or not he'd known about Jody's quest for the tape, but there was no reason to think he'd do anything but continue to deny it. But we figured that if nothing else, we could get a couple of hours of volunteering in before going to see Turner. When we walked into the office, we were stopped by the guard, who signaled to Sean Stillman. He frowned and came over to us. "You finally got here. I was beginning to wonder." "What's going on?" I asked. "I told Jerry to stop you when you came in because the big man himself asked to see you the minute you got here." It took me a minute to realize that Jerry must be the name of the guard. "Oh, okay." Sean led us to Clark's office and rapped lightly on the door. "Come in," Clark called out in his pleasing baritone. Sean opened the door, popped his head in, and said, "Sir, they're here." "Bring them in." As we entered, Clark rose from behind his desk and greeted us with a smile that had won the hearts of his followers. He shook hands with both of us in turn and said, "Thank you, Sean," and then went back behind his desk and sat. Sean departed without a word after a slight hesitation that showed his disappointment at not being included in the meeting. Apparently, he thought that since it involved members of his staff, he would be allowed to sit in. He closed the door with a sharp click. "Be seated, gentlemen," said Clark. I sat in the chair across from him, and Peter pulled another one over from the conference table by the windows and sat beside me. "Well," Clark said expansively as he sat back in his chair, "we've had a lot of excitement here today." "We have?" said Peter. "Yes, some gentlemen from the FBI was here this morning questioning everyone. First, let me say that they told me that the two of you were involved in some sort of accident yesterday." "If you can call having your car blown up an accident," Peter replied. I know, he said ruefully. "I couldn't be more shocked by this. Are the two of you all right?" "Yeah," I said. "We weren't in the car at the time." "Of course. The agents did explain that this was a deliberate action. It's just so hard to believe that anybody would do something like that." "It's not the first time it's happened," I said. "It's just the first time they missed." Clark shook his head in apparent disbelief. "It's so hard to understand people who would have killed someone just because they were working for me." I glanced at Peter. "Mr. Clark, I don't think that's the reason. It seems Jody was killed because she was trying to get a videotape containing evidence that involves Fritz Peterson in a scandal." Clark's eyes glazed over at the mention of the tape. "Yes, that's one of the things the FBI agents were asking about. I'll tell you the same thing I told them. The Charles Clark campaign isn't interested in dirt on any of the other candidates. If Jody Lynn Hayden was looking for scandal, she was doing it entirely on her own accord, and if I'd known about it, I would have put an end to it." "You mean you didn't know?" Peter asked. There was a beat before Clark said, "No, why would I?" "Because we were told that your campaign manager knew." This was the good thing about the fact that Mary had told us things that she wouldn't tell Agents Henry and Raymond. It gave us the chance to be the ones to surprise them with the information. Clark went saucer-eyed, and he dropped the pencil he'd been toying with. "What? John knew?" "That's what we heard." Clark stammered for a moment, then pressed a button on top of his desk. We heard a buzzer sound in the next room. He then raised a palm. Just a minute." After a brief wait, Schuler came into the office. "Yeah, Charlie." He spotted us and added, "Oh, hello." "John, I want to know something. Did you know beforehand that Jody Lynn Hayden was looking for this tape that the FBI was asking about?" Since he'd positioned himself a few feet behind us, both Peter and I had to twist around in our seats to see his reaction. He eyed us with contempt, then looked up at his boss. "As a matter of fact, I did." Why didn't you tell me about it? I didn't want to bother you with it. I told Jody in no uncertain terms that we would have nothing to do with it, and that she was to stop it immediately. I sent her away very unhappy, but I thought that was the end of it. You should have told me. I'm sorry, sir, Sheila replied. Clark then turned to us. I wanted to be clear that whatever Jody was doing, she was doing it on her own. It had nothing to do with this office. You don't realize how damaging something like this could be if it got out. No matter how much I disavowed my involvement, people would still think I was planning to run a smear campaign, and nothing could be further from the truth. I also wanted to be clear that under no circumstances do I want anyone to keep looking for that tape. Mr. Clark, you don't seem to understand, I said. This is no longer a matter of politics. That tape may be evidence in a murder. It has to be found. So you're going to continue to try to find it? We have to. If for no other reason, then someone has tried to kill us over it. He sat back in his chair and sighed deeply. And then I'm going to have to relieve you of your duties. What? I said in disbelief. And ask that you not concern yourself in my campaign anymore. You're kicking us out, Peter said incredulously. But we're volunteers. I'm sorry, but I can't have anyone even remotely connected with my campaign running the risk of making it look like I'm involved in trying to smear another candidate. But, Mr. Clark... Gentlemen, Schuler interrupted loudly, you heard the man. Now, we're very busy and the office has already been disrupted enough because of you. John, Clark said warningly. Because of us, I exclaimed indignantly. You mean because of a murder? So I'm going to have to ask you to leave, he said, completely ignoring me. Or am I going to have to call the guard and have you removed? Both Peter and I were struck speechless. When I regained the use of my vocal cords, I said, that won't be necessary. We got up and exited the office without another word. All eyes were on us as we left the headquarters. I suppose it had gotten around that we were the cause of the FBI presence at the office that day. I'm not sure I could blame them for their attitude. Most of these people believed wholeheartedly in Clark, and the thought that we'd somehow been connected with a potentially volatile incident probably didn't sit well with people who didn't have all the facts. Then again, we didn't have all the facts either. Well, I said as we rode down the elevator, we've been fired twice in the same day. That's a record even for us. Yeah, said Peter, and one of them was a volunteer job. I don't think we could get much lower than that. With a couple of hours left before we could try to catch Ned Turner, we went home. I almost let out a yelp when we walked in the door and found Mother seated on the couch beside Commander Frank O'Neill. Frank! I exclaimed. What a pleasant surprise. He stared at me blankly for a moment. Alex. Peter. Perhaps it was his close proximity to my mother or my concern about her current love life, but I found myself assessing Frank anew. He was still ruggedly handsome, the type of man I'd probably find myself attracted to if he wasn't 20 years older than me and interested in my mother. Oh, yes, and if I wasn't married. And his good looks were only nominally marred by the slightly hang-dog quality that develops in most of Mother's former suitors. And he's nice enough. I don't know exactly why their romance didn't work out, and I never asked. I figured that it was one of those chemical things that is best left undiscussed between mother and son. Frank stopped by when he heard about our car trouble, said Mother. You make it sound like the engine's developed a rattle, I said. The engine is splayed all over Lakeshore Drive. So I heard, said Frank. I was just telling your mother that we don't have a clue yet as to who tried to kill you. Neither does the FBI. All we know so far is that the call to your house came from a payphone just south of the Loop. Has there been any progress on the first bombing? The headquarters one, Peter asked. Frank let out a muffled grunt. I'm sure I don't know anything you don't already know. His tone once again implied that he believed we'd lied to him about working with the FBI on this case. If the conversation had taken place a few hours earlier, we would have had to backpedal like mad to try to explain that we were working for them, but hadn't been when he accused us of it. However, at that point, the truth seemed much easier. I said, Frank, I can honestly say that we were not working for the FBI. That's funny, because when your car was bombed last night, you told two of my men that you were working for the FBI. And Agent Henry and Agent Raymond showed up and took you away. I don't so much mind you working for them, except for the fact that you keep endangering your lives. He glanced at Mother out of the corner of his eye. As much as I mind you lying about it. Well, we were working for them last night, but we're not now, I said pleadingly. And when I first asked you if you were working for them, we weren't then. So, you weren't. Then you were. Now you're not. I threw up my hands. You see, this is why we lie. The truth always sounds so crazy. Alex, please, said Mother. She then turned to Frank. Henry and Raymond asked us to do a little job of work for them, but that's over. Unfortunately, it looks as though this little job may have caused us a spot of trouble. Frank raised his eyebrows. Somebody blew up your car. Mother blinked. Yes, well, perhaps that was a bit of an understatement. Anyway, of course I'm worried, so I wondered if you could fill us in on what's being done. He looked at her so long and so hard she was compelled to add, I'm not asking you any more than anyone would under the circumstances. Frank shifted in his seat, then said, Yeah, well, my people have been cooperating with the FBI. I don't know very much. I do know that from what they've been able to piece together, the bomb that destroyed Clark's office wasn't exactly sophisticated. It got the job done, said Peter. Right. What I mean is, there was nothing to tell them whether or not it was done by a pro. According to Henry, technically, they believe the bomb could have been built by an amateur. They don't have anything yet about the one in your car. They've been following up leads on the first bombing, mostly the threats, and getting nowhere. I know how they feel, I said. Then this morning they brought up the subject of a videotape. He looked at me pointedly, which apparently they hadn't known about. We hadn't gotten a chance to make a report about it yet, I said lamely. He turned back to Mother. I believe they're over at Fritz Peterson's headquarters right now, questioning him about the tape. If that would do any good, said Peter. He certainly wouldn't admit to it. Well, we'll see. Maybe they can get something out of him. I'm assuming you've told Henry everything you know. Of course we did. I was startled by the question, and I'm afraid I faltered enough to make myself look guilty. Frank rolled his eyes, then he said his goodbyes and left. As usual, he looked a lot less happy on his way out than he did when he arrived. Did you find out anything? Mother asked. Yeah, said Peter with a laugh. We found out nobody wants us. Clark has informed us that since we won't stop our investigation, we are relieved of our volunteer duties. It seems word of that tape has spread very quickly, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. Mother knit her brows. It sounds like he doesn't want it found. He doesn't, I said. He's afraid it will look like his campaign has been trying to smear Peterson. And he's right. Jody was the manager of his headquarters, so if it comes out that she was digging for dirt, no matter what Clark says, people will believe that he was behind it, but he's managed to cover his ass. If the tape comes out, now all he has to do is say he dismissed the people who were looking for it the minute he heard about it. It still seems odd to me, said Mother, because even if it would look as if Clark was involved in getting dirt, once it comes out, even though people might not like it, the scandal would probably hurt Peterson more than it would Clark. Depending on what it is, Peter pointed out. I sighed. I just hope it's not what everybody says it is. I really hate it when homosexuality is used as a scandal. That's just chat, though, said Mother. There's no telling what's really on the tape until we see it. But I did learn something rather interesting about that this afternoon. What's that? I had a chat on the phone with Larry Nelson. You did, I said wearily. She looked surprised. Yes, shouldn't I have? Of course, I said quickly. I don't know what I was thinking, she laughed. You made it sound odd that I would talk to him. Anyway, since he's been on to those FBI fellows, I thought I'd ask him if he knew how they were getting on, and he said the same thing that Frank did. They're trying to trace the tape, but he added something very interesting. She paused dramatically. Out with it, I said irritably. He said that the FBI doesn't believe there is such a tape, and that he doesn't either. What? Peter and I exclaimed in unison. And after talking to him, I'm inclined to agree. You've got to be kidding, I said. And since Larry put it to me, if there was a scandal so big as to be caught on videotape, it's sure to have come out before now. The way Larry explained it, Political candidates have become so fearful of something that can be used against them being discovered that they hire detectives to look into their own past to see if anything can be found. You'd think something as dire as a videotape would have surfaced, wouldn't you? Not if nobody knew about it at the time, I said. But we know the tape exists now. No, we know somebody told Jody that it did. Yes, and now we think we know who, said Peter. He then filled her in about Ned Turner. But you see, that's still just a lot of chat, Mother countered. If Ned had any proof, he'd have printed it, wouldn't he? And if the proof was tangible enough to get around to him, then it would have been found before, don't you think? My mind was spinning. What she said made perfect sense, but there was something wrong with it that I couldn't put my finger on. I had that sick feeling in my stomach that you get when you sense that the answer to something important is just out of your reach. No, I said finally, slowly shaking my head. It won't do. Jody must have been told about the tape before the night she was killed. And something had to have happened between the time she first learned of the possibility of his existence and the phone call. She got in the middle of the night. Peter said, obviously she tried to find it. But who would she have been asking about it? Said Mother. Nobody in Peterson's camp would have admitted knowing, and you proved for yourself that nobody in Clark's camp did either. Maybe she tried to blackmail somebody with it. I said, no, she was much too straight and narrow for something like that, said Peter. That's not the kind of blackmail I mean. She could have called Peterson and told him that she knew about it to try to get him to drop out of the race. I wouldn't put that past her. It doesn't matter, Mother said with a cluck of her tongue. Whoever killed her knew that she didn't have the tape, because he lured her to her death with it. She heaved a disgusted sigh. Honestly, I wish that silly girl had kept to herself. Well, maybe Ned Turner will be able to give us some help. If he knows about the tape, he might have given Jody a lead for how to find it, said Peter. I turned to Mother. Do you want to come with us? No, I'd love to, but I have a date. With Simon, I replied, trying not to sound too displeased. Of course. I'm surprised he hasn't been scampering after your heels today. This is the last day, but one for his seminars. So he couldn't take me around today, but we are having dinner. And then what? I asked. I mean, after his seminars are all over, she gave me her most enigmatic smile. And then we shall see what we shall see. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.